If you want to get into one of the best law schools in the country, the goalpost for you, my friend, is scoring at least 170 on the law school admission test. For most other decent law schools, you're looking at a bare minimum of 150. And since the LSAT score is the most important part of your law school application, this exam is a really big deal. The question is, for those of you who have decided to self-study, how can you best prepare for an exam that is notoriously tricky, using logic games and reading comprehension and critical reasoning to assess you, rather than content knowledge, which is so much easier to study for? Well, here to answer this question is professional LSAT coach Steve Schwartz, who has for over a decade helped thousands of students get into their desired law schools, win large scholarships, and become successful attorneys, all on their own steam. So with that said, here's Steve's advice on the best way to study for the LSAT. Steve, could you very briefly walk us through the challenge that is the LSAT? What's different about this exam to anything students may have encountered before in college?
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest thing is that it's not an exam of content. There's no memorization involved. So a lot of times students coming from the context of having studied biology or history or English or whatever, they're not being asked to analyze arguments. They're being asked to sometimes regurgitate information or analyze a text and write about it. There's no writing on this and there's no memorization either. It's a test of critical reasoning ability. And that can be a rude awakening for some students when they recognize that maybe they're not as skeptical as they expected.
Right. And I imagine, you go into this challenge thinking, if I just study this content, I can write this exam and do well. But actually, it's more about skills, honing those skills like reasoning, you mentioned, and logic. Okay, so for those who haven't yet surveyed the LSAT study landscape, please walk us through the two choices students face, one being guided study with some kind of prep course or tutoring service, and the other being the self-study route.
Yeah, sure. So historically, the major options have been taking a structured prep course over the course of 2 to 3 months, covering the exam from beginning to end. Another option would be one-on-one private tutoring. Yeah. And those have been the historical major options. Since then, things have kind of changed. We're now online on-demand video courses are yet another option. But more recently, with the rise of high-quality self-study materials, a lot of students are working out of a book on their own, covering the exam start to finish. Benefits of that course of study are that it's much cheaper, it's much more affordable, and you have a lot more flexibility. But students may want a bit more support. And that's where the tutoring or the courses can come in.
Right. So if students are considering a self-study route, what do they kind of need to know about the challenge from the outset? How should they equip themselves to do well at home?
Well, they need to know that having the previously administered exams are not going to be sufficient because those exams do not include explanations. They do not include strategies. And so those students would be well served to supplement the exams with explanations, with a low-cost on-demand video course, or perhaps a high-quality textbook of some kind to give them a strong foundation in each of the sections and each of the question types prior to taking full-length timed exams.
Okay. And then in terms of study habits from home, like how long before an exam should they start studying? Like, what should their study plan or schedule look like?
That's a great question. Yeah, a lot of students will try to get it all done in 2 to 3 months because they underestimate just how difficult this exam is going to be. In my experience, students typically need at least 5 to 6 months in order to reach their fullest potential. And that's a long time, but the LSAT is an incredibly important exam. It's the number one factor in the admissions process. And so it's worth investing that time.
It's a gateway to the best schools.
It is.
The best schools. All right. Well, take us on a tour of the mind of somebody who has scored 170 plus on the LSAT. What does that look like?
Yeah, sure. So 170 plus, that's the top 3%. So that's a pretty elite group. You want that score in order to get into the top 14 law schools, which includes many of the Ivies. So that requires being consistently critical and skeptical of every argument you encounter, not taking things at face value, recognizing that there is going to be some kind of gap between evidence and conclusions. So you want to ask yourself, how is it possible for the evidence to be true, yet for the conclusion to not logically follow? In other words, how can you problematize the argument? And doing this consistently is required to get a top score.
Right, which is why you start 5 to 6 months before practicing that. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, on your blog, you talk about how much study and practice it took you to top that LSAT score of 170. So what key habits and study methods did you use to improve your score?
Well, the reason it took me so long, and it took me an entire year of dedicated studying, and at least half of that was a complete waste of time. So I made the mistake a lot of students make going in, which is where I took exam after exam after exam, measuring my results, hoping something would change. But that's also the definition of insanity, just doing the same thing again and again and again. What you really got to do is look critically at every mistake you made, every question you got wrong, every question you had difficulty with, and figuring out why. That review process is the number one thing students could do differently in order to get that higher score, to learn from their mistakes, because the exam repeats itself in disguise.
It's amazing the amount of parallel between all of these major entrance exams, similarly with the medical college's admissions test, for doctors, people wanting to become doctors, how it requires you to process your performance in these tests, but not your performance, but both the correct and the incorrect answers. And if it is multiple choice, not just why is this single answer the correct answer, but why are the others less correct than this more correct answer? So if you're not spending as much time, if not more time processing the answers, then you're actually not getting value out of those tests.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of students will look at the incorrect answer and say, sounds good to me, and never even get to the correct answer. And so a lot of the study process, a lot of the review process is about figuring out what makes a tempting wrong answer choice wrong in the end. So figuring out which traps you are uniquely prone to falling for, what made it tempting and what made it wrong. And then if you glossed over the right answer or eliminated, what made it unappealing, but what still technically makes it correct? A lot of times the correct answer will be the best of the worst. It's not even that great, but the other four are definitely wrong. So by elimination, it has to be the answer.
Sounds incredibly taxing.
It is.
Is any content at all that grads can or college students can learn going into the LSAT? Anything at all? Is it all skills based?
It's pretty much all skills based. There is some very, very limited usefulness of flashcards in terms of identifying question types. So for example, the LSAT will have questions that ask you to strengthen an argument or weaken an argument or identify a flaw in an argument, but they won't just use the keywords strengthen, weaken, flaw. So they'll use a lot of synonyms, which can be tricky sometimes to spot what they're actually asking you to do. And so that's something you'd want to know before going in, of course, but a lot of it's really just getting good at evaluating arguments.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, if you are studying on your own, how do you know if you're on track to do well on the LSAT? And where do you turn to if you do have questions or problems?
Sure. So my rule of thumb in terms of knowing whether you're ready is taking the average of your most recent 5 practice test results, averaging them. That'll give you the best indication of where you stand. And so I'd recommend doing 1 exam a week or 2 exams a week in the couple of months in the lead up to test day. If you're scoring around where your goal score is, then you're probably in good shape. If not, you might want to push back the test date and allow a bit more time.
Okay. And I mean, who can you speak to? Like if you're on your own doing this, are they study groups? Where would you find a mentor?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, yes, there are study groups. You can go on to Facebook groups, for example. There's Facebook groups, there's GroupMe's to find self-organized groups, or you could look up a prep course. Mine, for example, we have study groups built into the course. Every single night, there's a study group going on. It could be on logic games, logical reasoning, or reading comp, or just general nature. And it's a place to connect with like-minded students walking through the process together. Or of course, I also have live classes via Zoom. So that's just one option. Otherwise, students could find a one-on-one tutor, for example, to get more personalized support.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So what do you want students watching this to know about the LSAT ahead of the challenge? Is there something perhaps you wish you had known before you took the LSAT?
Yeah, sure. One big thing is that I wish I'd known not to take a cold diagnostic. The results were incredibly discouraging and did not reflect my true potential.
Right.
It just told me what I should have already known, which is that I hadn't studied yet. I didn't know the material yet. I didn't know how to take the exam. And so it's like taking a test in a foreign language when you've never studied it before. Of course, it's not going to go well. And so I wish I'd known not to do that. And even if I had, to not place any importance on it at all.
Yeah, maybe that's the key there, it's because doing such a test could show you what the LSAT looks like and what you're actually preparing for, but not to take the results personally or to heart or let it discourage you.
Exactly. It's just a benchmark to measure your later progress.
Okay. And finally, how can your blog and brand LSAT Unplugged help students out there take on this first major hurdle as aspiring attorneys?
Yeah, sure. So LSAT Unplugged, we've got live online prep courses. We have live classes virtually every single day, covering the nuts and bolts of every section, every question type. So logic games, logical reasoning, reading comp. We meet online via Zoom. We have classes, we have study groups, we have weekly practice tests, and a whole library of video recordings of previous classes, explanations and such. And so that's the best place to go. And if students want a free, easy way to get started, I've got a free, easy LSAT cheat sheet that students can download at bit.ly/LSAT cheat sheet to get started.
Awesome. All right, Steve, thank you so much for speaking to me today and answering my questions. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So there you have it, how to dramatically improve your LSAT score through self-study, whether you choose to take a prep course or not. Because let's face it, all routes to the LSAT invariably include tons of at-home practice. Now, if you're curious to learn more about Steve Schwartz, check out his website and blog, as well as his YouTube channel and podcast, LSAT Unplugged. Details below. You can also browse through Brainscape's thousands of user-generated flashcards for the LSAT. Many other pre-law students just like you have worked hard to compile these decks of adaptive flashcards that use spaced repetition to help you learn so much faster. So why not leverage their labors to help you rise to your challenge?